Hey everyone, it's Ivan with KidBadger.com, here to bring you part 8 in my Factory to Table series. This time, talking about the hunt. If you followed my Factory to Table series, you know I basically set out to build all of this stuff with some help where I needed it and put it all together with the end goal of ultimately taking game. And after having built this out, getting a good 0, I was like, all right, let's do this. And as far as time of year when I actually finished getting all of this stuff built, it was kind of mid-spring 2019. There was still some spring bear season. So I was like, all right, let's try this. First time I'd ever baited for bears. Up here in Idaho, there are lots of black bears and you can bait, which is kind of ideal because, as a friend of mine put, I will paraphrase, hunting with subsonic 300 Blackout, it's kind of like hunting with a compound bow. Your distances and shot placement become very important. So to that end, I was like, baiting for bears would be perfect. I can essentially set up my bait, have my blind at a known distance away, good to go. Of course, I'd never done it before, but after talking to a buddy of mine, a hunting guide, gave me some tips, went ahead and got my bait going. But in the spring, I was pretty busy, so I'd go back and forth. Every time I had a chance, I'd go up there, I would check it, I'd refill it, do all these things, but I was ultimately gone a fair amount of time. Because of that, there would be times when the bait would go dry. I wouldn't have a chance to actually go sit on it. About an hour-and-a-half drive from my house one way. Long story short, the last day of the season, I was out there, sitting there, cute little bear came by. Too small, like, I don't know, he's probably just left his mom. I wasn't gonna take him. So I was like, okay, I will wait. Fall bear will be coming up later in the year. Fortunately, fall bear opens relatively early, and as we moved into it, I had a better idea of what I was doing. So I did a pretty good job of continually keeping it filled. Started getting some bears coming in, seeing pictures. They're relatively small, and spoke with my buddy, the guide, and he's like, don't worry, be patient. Like, you have more time, and chances are bigger ones will come in. Again, work took me away. Whether it was tactical games or something else, I ended up going, bait ended up going dry, and at least one of the bears that was on film stopped coming, and then I ran into the other things, like the weather. We ended up getting a early snow up here, and a lot more was forecast. With that, the place where it was, again, hour-and-a-half drive one way, not accessible once the weather turns. It's not maintained for winter, so I had to end up pulling my bear bait early. It's like, damn, it's time to move on to deer, because we were then right in the beginning of deer season. And lastly, real quick, with respect to bear season, it wasn't my lack of trying. I spent a lot of hours sitting in the blind up there, sitting there in the rain, or going up and sitting there essentially from afternoon into the last bit of shooting light, going back, making camp, waking up the next morning, getting up there before dawn. Could not get on a bear. So I was like, all right, let's do this. Deer season, let's make this thing happen. At that point, you have two options. You have public land, which can be hard because there's a lot of pressure on deer, and you have private, but you have access to private. Well, one of my buddies, Matt from Jerking the Trigger, lives north of me, hour plus, and on pretty cool, albeit relatively small piece of property. And so I split my time between driving up to go hunt there and going out on public. For whatever reason, it's one of those things where sometimes you feel you can't get a break. I would go up there and a deer would be coming down. It would get spooked from whatever it may be, gone. Or I'd make the trip up there. As soon as I get up there, turns out like the adjacent property, they have a bunch of heavy equipment. They're making all kinds of noise, like there's nothing moving. I'm like, okay. Couple that with, honestly, some weird weather patterns. Whether it, again, getting cold early and snowing, and then a week or so of really warm weather. And so all the patterning was different. Then you have public land where There's a lot of people out there and a lot of pressure. And I was having a hard time. I was like, I need to get this, this needs to happen. So with about a week left in deer season, I headed out. Again, talked to my buddy, the guide, and he's like, hey, this is the time to be out on logging roads and stuff like that. It's during the rut. Bucks are out there doing stupid stuff, wandering around. I'm like, okay, let's go do this. Ended out, cruising along a logging road, and down the side, about 40 yards away, beautiful buck. There was a doe he was chasing. Doe was smart, took off, bailed. And this buck sitting there, kind of looks back at me, goes down a little bit further, stops, looks back. I'm like, whew. Not the best shot, but it's the shot that I was provided with. Downhill, bunch of different brush, debris, trees, stuff like that. And largely the buck's body was basically facing away from me, and it was obscured. Neck and head was there. I'm like, all right, not a lot of time. Get the crosshairs, bring it up, kind of base of the skull, off safe, break the shot. Drops and starts kicking. Can't even tell you the sense of relief I was feeling at that point. Like, I was overjoyed. 1, meat in the freezer. 2, the fact that I could finish up this series on this beautiful animal. And not to mention that, also the opportunity to finish up how I kind of wanted to finish the video series with respect to the knife, collaboration with CK Knife and Tool. Whew, super relieved. I'm like, man, I'm gonna be able to get this thing dressed out, quartered, still make it in time to pick up my boys from school. Perfect. So I go start taking first rack another round in there. It's kicking a little bit. Obscured, can't really see it. And I'm like, okay. Finally gets quiet. I'm like, all right, let's do this thing. So I'm kind of taking inventory of my pack, making sure I have everything I need there. And I hear this thrashing. I grab my gun, I go, and it's up and it's moving. And honestly, it looks like it's drunk. Boom, crashes back down into a down tree. And I'm trying to get a shot and I can't. I mean, everything's so dense up here, couldn't get one. Kept trying to move laterally and it got up, crashed through, I heard it, and then got quiet again. I'm like, okay, I don't want to lose this animal. Yes, ideally, if you lung it or something like that, you just wait. You don't want to jump it, but I was like, this needs to happen right now. Went down and gone to the wind. Spent the next like 2.5 hours looking for this thing. Couldn't find it. And I found very little blood trail for about 20 yards. And whew, I was bummed, man. Like, I was devastated. Like, one, I've never lost an animal, never lost a game animal. And so now, not only was I not able to finish out this or the content on my knife or fill up my freezer or any of those things, like, now this animal is out there into the wind. And like, it ate at me a lot. I was like, damn it. 1 week left. So I was like, okay. And I went out every single day for that next week. Nothing. Even Thanksgiving Day, took my boys in tow. And yeah, didn't see anything. We ended up having a good time though, made some ramen, had fun out there, but yeah, couldn't get on anything. And then deer season was over. I was like, damn it. I ended up talking to some friends and I was like, this is what's going on, this is where I'm at. And long story short, I ended up heading down to Texas to go meet up with Todd Huey to get on some wild boars with us, or wild hogs. Hunting down there with Todd was an incredible experience. On the one hand, just a wealth of knowledge, whether it is kind of how-to patterning, stuff like that with respect to feral hogs, or the entire night vision, thermal, stuff like that. Incredibly knowledgeable on all of that. The adventure started down there, taking this guy out during the day, went down into the swamps, looking for some feral hogs, and had this cranked down to 1, illumination on. Ended up definitely seeing some fresh sign. At one point heard some stuff, but couldn't get on it. By the time we got over there, they had already cut out. So we then started to prepare for that night. Todd went ahead and helped me. We pulled off this day optic and threw on a Pulsar. Their Trail LRF, I believe, laser rangefinder. Pretty cool optic. Actually has a built-in laser rangefinder, which is really important with thermal because you're looking at a screen, like there's no depth perception. So ended up using that on here and went out for an adventure. Here's what transpired. Sometimes these things come and they're absolutely hard won. I've been out here with Todd Huey of Lone Star Boars and we've been after it. He's got me on a bunch of pigs. Sometimes things don't go right. Made a shot earlier. It definitely connected and it did not have the desired effect. Got on some other ones and it was me, man. I was dropping some rounds. It is what it is. And we continued throughout the night. Finally got to the point where pretty much like hallucinating, seeing things that weren't there. Super tired, fading in and out. And came back and we got on another 4 or 5 little group of pigs. Took a shot, wasn't sure of the distance, went over the top, clean miss. And I'm like, oh my gosh, so frustrated. Cruiser, he's like, well, do you want to make another trip around? I'm like, yeah, I'm awake now. Let's do this thing. So came back around, sure enough, he's like, they're going to go down into this bottom. And we came around the side of it and there they were, out kind of on this tree line. I was like, all right, let's do this for reals now. Started going forward, starting approaching, and up to this point I'd used some shooting sticks. Not that familiar with them, kind of took me a little while to get going. And then also just moving the PVS 14 up and down. So I'm like, okay, gonna go totally off script, gonna, against probably better judgment, end up using this thermal, moving with it, and got up close, got in a kneeling position, and was waiting, and right up here, kind of on this rise, like a couple of them that already dipped down. And I was like, all right, is this my best shot? Found one, nice clean silhouette of the head, got the reticle where it should be. Oh, backing up a step. Out of ways, there's a laser rangefinder on this, which was not working earlier because of how foggy it was. And I managed to get it to range here is about 78. And so I started pacing off towards them and basically ground out about 30, 35 paces, at which point I'm like, all right, probably a good 50 yards, which is what this thing zeroed for. And yeah, took that shot. I heard it impact and I was like, please drop. And I saw it turn, saw its legs up, and it just kept kicking and then slowly kind of lost basically view of it. And I saw the other ones, they bolted and racked another round in there. Slowly came around, I couldn't see anything. I was like, please be down. And sure enough, it was. Round impacted basically right in front of the eye, and fortunately penetrated through. Subsonic Celos, 188 grain from Discreet Ballistics. And yeah, it was dead right there. But this has absolutely been a journey and quite an adventure. Sometimes I feel like I can't get a break. And it's not from my lack of trying, but that part of it is trying to film and work around things that don't want to work with you. Like a deer doesn't want to get filmed, most certainly doesn't want to get shot. And all the time spent trying to set up the shot as far as camera tripod for being in a blind over a game trail for a deer, or in the blind for my bear bait, and all these different things. And it has been trying and a challenge, but I was ultimately finally able to take some game with this MiniFix and kind of round out this factory to table series. I'm going to come back, join me for part 9, where I will pretty much wrap up everything. It'll largely be a review of, honestly, kind of the MiniFix and this entire setup and my experience with all of it. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.